to the 12 Tribes of Israel. This is Brother NamirYAH, and today we're going to be talking about heaviness in our lives and depression and how it can affect us and how we should deal with it as a whole, and about how we should not deal with it by ourselves, but we should deal with it together or with two or more people. When we're young, sometimes we get sad and sometimes we feel the need to think bad thoughts about ourselves. Like, say we did something or made a mistake, then we'll take that mistake and we'll dwell on it. And when we dwell on that mistake, it'll continue to grow. And if we make more and more mistakes just like that, and it'll grow inside of us, and it'll give us doubt, and it'll make us lose our confidence and our faith, and it'll end up hurting us and bringing us down. So today's topic is just about how we can deal with these thoughts, these negative thoughts, and how to help ourselves get out of that ditch and get out of that hole, and to be positive and to think positive thoughts, and how we can greater and how we can grow from what we have been, and how we can continually grow as a person and as a whole. I'd like to go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 12.
The book of Proverbs, chapter 12, verse 25. Heaviness in the heart of man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad.
Well, what Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25 is basically saying is that we can't fix ourselves on the bad side of life. When we dwell on the heaviness when we dwell on heaviness and on depression, it makes our heart stoop, and it makes us very sad in the inside. And when we're sad on the inside, we don't give them the love and respect that they deserve. Like our family members, we'll be harsh to them, and we won't communicate properly, and we'll do things that don't work well with the family, or even with friends, even with peers, anybody you may know. You end up giving them the cold shoulder, and that's not what they deserve. We should be glad and have good tidings, and we should always have a joyful spirit. We should also be kind to one another. We should care for we should care for one another whether we know them or not, and we should say kind words instead of saying like words to hurt people, or saying insults. When we give compliments instead of insults, we can make that person happy. We don't know how they may be feeling on the inside, or how they may be feeling when we're not around them. So if we give kind words and happy words, then we may turn their life around. But if we give insults, then we'll carry the burden, because we're the ones that ended up causing their misery.
The book of Galatians, chapter 5, starting at verse 12. I'll start at verse 13.
For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only choose not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the Torah is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So all the commandments go back to loving Yehovah and Yehoshua, and loving our neighbor as thyself. But verse 15. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one another. This I say then, walk in the Ruach, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Let's skip down to verse 22. The book of Galatians, chapter 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Ruach is love, joy, shalom, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no Torah. And they that are Mashiachs have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. If we live in the Ruach, let us also walk in the Ruach. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another.
So the book of Galatians tells us that we need love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, meekness, temperance, faith, and long-suffering. We need those things. We need those things in our lives in order for us to have a good spirit and a good ruach. Against these there are no law. So if we don't have these things, we're not keeping the commandments. We need to have a joy in our lives. We can't dwell on sadness and sorrow, because dwelling on sadness and sorrow will only lead us to sad thoughts and only lead our mind and our third eye to things that are not good, and we can't be going down that path. So we need to stay steadfast and always look at the gifts that Yah has given us and blessed us with, because a lot of people in this world have way less than what we have. So we need to be grateful and thankful. We cannot be desirable of vainglory, as it says in verse 26. We can't want whatever other people have and want to steal that from other people. And we can't have, as I said before, negative thoughts toward our neighbor, because that in itself will give us negative thoughts, and it'll cause us to go down the wrong path, and it'll cause us to commit all the other sins of lust. It can cause us to commit, it can cause us to steal, and that'll cause us to lie, and it'll just go in one big circle. So, and everything that we end up doing will lead from a thought of envy, a thought of sorrow. It can be any bad thought, and once we think on that, we'll end up doing what we think, and then that'll lead to a chain reaction.
Here's a second witness of what was said in Galatians, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2. With all lowliness and meekness, and with long suffering, forbearing another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Ruach and in the bond of Shalom.
Satan uses depression to get us to cut ourselves and hurt ourselves and harm ourselves and even harm others, which is very, very against Torah. And the book of Leviticus talks about it, about how we shouldn't be cutting our flesh, and we shouldn't be injuring ourselves and making marks on our body. Satan will get us to do these types of things, and there's been many instances where children and teens have been doing this because of their sadness, and instead of praying and asking Yehovah for hope and for faith, they resort to self-harm, which is it's not right, and it's against Torah. We should be on our guard against this as a nation, and we should also bring this to notice and bring this to account so nobody else falls into this trap.
The book of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 28. Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am Yehovah.
So in Leviticus, the scripture tells us plainly not to make any type of marks on our body, whether it be tattoo, cuts, things of that nature. We shouldn't be doing stuff like that because it's against Yehovah. And we should also be on our guard against Satan as he gets into our mind and gets us to sin against Yehovah and gets us to try to get tattoos and to cut ourselves and to do things that we know aren't right. Another reason we shouldn't put marks on our body is because Scripture tells us our body is the temple. When we put marks on our body, we're basically desecrating the temple. Say we put tattoos in the body is basically putting another Elohim before Yehovah, and then we'll end up disobeying all the commandments. So we should refrain from any marks, tattoos, any cuttings, things that mark our flesh intentionally. When we get these type of negative thoughts, we should ask and pray to Yehovah for hope and for joy, and to bring gladness in our minds and in our spirits. So let's go to the book of Romans chapter 15, verse 13.
The book of Romans chapter 15, verse 13. Now the Elohim of hope fill you with all joy and shalom in believing, that ye may abound in hope through the power of the Ruach HaKodesh. And I myself also am persuaded of you, my brethren, that ye also are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, able also to admonish one to another.
When we ask Yehovah and pray to Yehovah for joy and to get rid of our sadness, He'll give it to us abundantly, and He'll give us joy, happiness, and as it says in Romans chapter 15, verse 13, He'll give us joy, shalom, and believing. So he'll also give us faith. And it also says he'll give us hope. So all of those are qualities of good and not bad. So once we believe and ask Jehovah for to lift our sadness away, and if we're faithful, then he'll do it for us, and he'll give it to us abundantly, so that we can be in good spirits and not bad spirits, and we can enjoy the things that Jehovah gives us instead of taking them for granted. So in conclusion, in order for us to break this bond and this curse of depression and of heaviness, we need to praise Jehovah and ask him for hope and for joy in our lives, and to bless us with the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. And to pray, you need two or more to gather. So in order for Jehovah to come in the midst, you need two or more gathered in the midst of y'all. That's in the book of Matthew chapter 18 verse 20. And the book of Matthew chapter 18 verse 20. So once we have two or more gathered, we refrain from self-harm, and we refrain from tattoos and things like that, because that damages our temple and is also against Torah. So once we do those three things, we should be doing that consistently. So once we do those three things consistently, then Yehovah should bring the Ruach HaKodesh in the midst of us and give us joy and give us happiness. So, shalom to the 12 tribes of Israel. May you have a good week. Shalom.